Hey loves, welcome back to the Get Loved Up podcast, your number one resource for inspiration and motivation to live your purpose, make healthy living a priority, and thrive doing what you love. I'm your host, Koya Webb, a small town girl who chased her dreams and caught them, a former track and field athlete who healed using spirituality and yoga, and an entrepreneur who didn't let sexual assault, racism, and insecurities dim her light. And now it's your turn to allow these episodes with some of the top voices in spirituality, wellness, and entrepreneurship to inspire you to thrive. Let's get loved up together. Welcome back to the Get Loved Up podcast, your one-stop shop for inspiration in the areas of spirituality, wellness, and entrepreneurship. Today, I am so excited to share my friend and amazing entrepreneur who went from being a chiropractor to running a multi-million-dollar BossBabe business. Danielle, she is the most humble, fun-loving, girl next door person you can meet. We literally met at a friend's party and have just been all up in each other's face since. Danielle, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. That was an impressive introduction. Thank you.
I just love your personality. I remember the first time I met you, I was just like, I like her. I really like her.
The feeling was mutual.
I think we started talking about nails. I was like, oh my God, your nails.
Yeah, we did. We bonded over food, nails, and relationships, I think.
Yes, absolutely. And that's kind of how I want to start. Like, I know relationships are really important to you. Can you tell me kind of what you look for in relationships?
Goodness, that's such a good question. And really, I would just start by saying, relationships sometimes they're kind of perceived as just a romantic relationship, but really relationships span across every sector in your life, whether it's business, whether it's friendship, whether it is romantic. And I think you can't get anywhere alone, and there's a saying that it's lonely at the top, but there's also the saying, if it's lonely at the top, you've done it wrong. And I really believe in that. And so for me, I get so much joy from relationships. I achieve so much with relationships that actually, you know what? I would rather do this with other people than on my own. That's probably why I ended up with a business partner.
I know, and that's just so exciting how you and Natalie met. But before that, you also met one of my dear friends, Nick Pigeon. Yeah. Can you tell me what your relationship is with Nick and how you chose her as your coach?
Yeah, so basically, as you kind of shared in the introduction, I was a chiropractor. So in 2010, I graduated from chiropractic school and, went on my merry way practicing. Over that period, I kind of started to get a little bit of a bug for entrepreneurship, and I started my own clinics, and I became a partner in the fastest growing primary healthcare brand in the UK. So with chiropractic, physiotherapy, GP, travel nurses, all the things. And that was going great, but one thing I realized in 2016, when my dad had a really nasty skiing accident, we were out on a family ski trip, and he slipped and fell and hit the snow and the slope at 70 miles an hour, 70 miles an hour.
Wow.
And he fractured his pelvis, all the way up. And he was helicoptered to the mountain, transferred hospitals, told he wouldn't necessarily be able to ski again. And he was also told that he had to stay laying down for 3 months, which meant that he was kept in France for a little while. And in that moment, or in those days that passed, I realized I had financial freedom. I wasn't super wealthy, but, I had enough to do what I wanted to do. And that was great. But I realized I didn't actually have freedom because I was tied to a set place, a set time every single day. And my life was governed in 15-minute appointments as a chiropractor. And whilst I loved what I did, I was like, wow, what's going to happen if, I want a child at some point, or my parents get sick again, and I just started me questioning. It really got me questioning what my values were and what I really wanted out of my life. And in that moment, I was like, do you know what? I don't know if this is everything that I want. And, a lot of people would say to me, well, you've trained all this time to do this, or why are you not content with what you've got? You've got a really good life. And I was like, yeah, I have. And I'm so grateful for all of that. And I want more. I want to love my life and get up every single day and be like, yes, this is absolutely the life that I want to lead. And I felt like I didn't have that at that point. So I really started exploring, okay, well, what does it look like? What does this life look like? And I started like journaling. And I mean, I didn't even know what I was really doing at that point. Like I was like journaling and visualization, but I was like, am I doing this right? I was finding random stuff on YouTube. And I realized that the way that I could create this for myself was by starting an online business. And like I said, at that point, I did a vocational degree. So a chiropractor, you go to be a chiropractor. There isn't really any other modules that you're doing outside of that. You're not getting any intuition, like you're not getting any tuition on like IT or anything like that. And I was like, okay, well, if I do this online business, like I don't know what I'm doing. I'm like, okay, well, I'll just start Googling it and reading and looking for it. And I think something amazing happens when you put an intention out there that you want to change, that you want to do something a little bit different. It's amazing how the universe conspires to support you doing that. And Nick Pigeon basically got shown to me on a Facebook ad, which is just absolutely hilarious. So she got shown to me on a Facebook ad that she was somebody who helped people start and grow online businesses. And without thinking about it, I just applied for this breakthrough call. And I had this call and she really opened up to me like, yeah, there's so much that was possible, and reaffirmed that I didn't have to go down the path that I was on, and that I could pivot and I could change, and that was okay. And so that's how she became my coach, was because she believed in me whilst I didn't believe in myself, and affirmed that, you know what, life is what you want it to be.
That is so amazing. And it's so amazing how much we need permission. And I love that you said, she affirmed you and said, yes, you can do that. And I think there's so many people listening that they just need the permission of you can do this. And they need someone to affirm them. Can you talk a little bit about how much coaching has really helped your career as you've grown over time?
Gosh, that's a great question. I think that coaching has come into my life in so many different forms, whether it's direct, like one-to-one stuff. And I think that can be from the coach to the therapy that I've done, or even, I'm working with a team on Facebook ads, or I'm working on a team doing video, and I'm learning and I'm allowing them to coach me alongside that. I think that's also what's really important, that there are so many people around us that can help support us on a journey if we ask the right questions and that we listen. And I think that's the really important thing whenever either looking for a coach or kind of wondering like, okay, what do I do next? So for me, what was funny was Nick was really instrumental in my journey, because actually not a lot of people know this. So I started working with her. And as part of, which that was a huge leap of faith, you guys. Like I literally was like, I don't know if I can do this, but I'm going to do it anyway, because the thought of not doing it was worse than the thought of doing it. No, hang on. The thought of doing it was worse than the thought of not doing it.
Right.
And so I started working with her. As part of working with her, she invited me to San Diego, September 2017. And at the time, I was working full-time as a chiropractor still. The online stuff was a side hustle. And, I'm living in the UK. She's like, okay, do you want to come out for this seminar by this guy called Brandon Burchard? And I'm like, I don't know who this Brandon Burchard guy is. And I'm like, I've been to America once before, but nothing other than that. Yeah, do you know what? I'll give it a go. So I used my vacation time from my job to fly out to San Diego for this seminar. What I didn't know was Nick was actually good friends with my now business partner, Natalie. Nick had also persuaded Natalie to come down to the seminar. And basically, Natalie and I bonded because we were the geeks at Brandon's seminar. Every single day, I was like, if I've taken these days off to do this, I am going to be a little geek and sit here the whole entire time. I'm not going to miss a minute that Brandon speaks on. And so I was just really putting myself into it, and so was Natalie. And so we just bonded over this kind of dedication to be there to learn. And it's really funny now because it's come full circle. I remember watching Brandon on stage thinking, oh my God, you are absolutely amazing. I'm learning so much, and what an amazing man. That was September 2017. And just to put it into context on how quickly you can change your life, to that 2017, went to see Brandon for the first time. In January 2020, Brandon texted me and asked me if I would want to go to Puerto Rico for this private mastermind.
Wow. That is so amazing. And you're right. You never know how things are going to divinely align when you say yes to yourself. And I think I just want to point that, like, you said yes to yourself. You said, first of all, you were doing what you thought you wanted to do at one point, being a chiropractor, which I think is important, because in Get Loved Up, we always encourage doing the things that bring you joy. It might not be your end thing, but if you do it, then eventually along your path of growth and evolution, you might find something else that brings you joy. And you did. And so when you met Brandon and when you decided, okay, I'm going to follow this coaching, Nick introduced you and you met Natalie. Can you talk a little bit about your relationship and Natalie?
So I think the first thing was that we had a common value, and that Natalie and I both valued growth. And I say growth because I think it can come in all forms. It can come in, most people think financial growth, but it can come in professional growth. It can be coming just actually learning to be a better person, growing, your communication skills or any skills that you have. And Natalie and I were very unapologetically ambitious. And this is the one thing that I get really triggered by, is that it's sometimes frowned upon that for people to own that they want more, or they want to change, or they're like, do you know what? I love my life and I'm striving for this next thing. I bought this car and I'm striving for this next car. I bought this house and I'm striving for this next house. And I really think there's like a lot of negative connotations around that by saying like you want more things. And those things also don't need to be materialistic, by the way. That's how my journey started. It wasn't I wanted more physical things. It was like, I want more freedom. I want the freedom to be able to travel. I want the freedom to be able to do these things. I want the freedom not to have to feel like I need to show up for work for the next 50 years. I want to be able to retire at some point, or I want to be able to have children and have that time off, whatever that looks like. Yeah. And Natalie and I bonded over that because we weren't afraid to say what we wanted out of our lives. And so we ended up, sharing a common theme around that. I went back to the UK. She was living in San Francisco at the time, right? But we just stayed in contact. And another thing that we always were doing was and I think that's probably why we ended up going to business together, we led a life of abundance where we were never like, oh, there's not room for two of us. There's not room for, if you're succeeding, I can't succeed. That's absolutely bullshit. Like, the more that we can thrive and support each other together, you can achieve more. And so Natalie and I came from that mindset. And so when I went back to the UK, we were continuing talking, and she was sharing with me about this idea that she had, which was the society, what our membership is called now. And it was basically a membership for female entrepreneurs. And I, like her, was lonely as an entrepreneur. I was entrepreneurial and ambitious. And honestly, it was kind of lonely because a lot of my friends from back home didn't really relate to where I was at. Right. They were kind of like, oh, what do you mean you want an online business when, like I said, you've just done this degree and you're doing all these things? So Natalie and I bonded that. And then we realized through conversations that if we were like that, there were going to be more women out there like this as well. And so versus just being like, oh, well, she's, doing that and I can't support her. I was just like one Friday night, I was sat in, kind of a bit bored, and I was just on my computer. And I was like, I'm just going to find some information. Natalie's mentioned this idea that she's got that she's going to do. And I just found a ton of research papers that kind of really reinforced that the idea was a good idea. I think it was the GEM reports about the proportions of female entrepreneurs and all that stuff. I just sent it to her. No expectation whatsoever. None. I just said, hi, Natalie, was thinking about you tonight. I found this information, thought it might help you in your project. Talk to you soon, Danielle. That was it. Didn't think anything of it. But because I did that and I went out my way and I was leading with abundance, and I was leading with okay, I'm just here to help and support. She then reached out to me and said, oh my goodness, thanks for sending this stuff over. And we just grew, our relationship started blossoming from there. And so for context of people on timeline, we met in the September 2017. We had incorporated our business together by 31st of January 2018.
Wow.
So it was a whirlwind relationship.
That's like, when you see someone and you fall in love at the first time, you just know. I love that. And it's so beautiful because I think a lot of people need examples of like, how can it work? And I'm sure it's not like you don't have problems and you don't have arguments, you don't have disagreements, but once you've committed, like we have this like-minded mission, let's work on it.
Yeah, 100%. And I guess that's the other part of this, the question around that communication. It's never easy. All relationships are never easy. And if you go into any relationship thinking it's going to be perfect, you're going to be really disappointed. Mm-hmm. So it's recognizing that actually this is a relationship that we are both committed to. We very much treat it like a marriage in some ways because it's a business marriage. Don't forget, when you do shareholders agreements or operating agreements with a company, that's like your prenup. I had a lawyer on our podcast talking about this the other day. That's like your prenup to your business, right? So we just went into it with really clear intentions about what we wanted. And BossBabe, we've always treated us like our baby. Like we're the mums of it. And BossBabe is our baby. And we are there to do best by BossBabe. And then we communicate through it. We've done therapy together. We've done, we go on holiday together. But one thing we've always practiced is honest, clean communication. And what I mean by that, clean communication is, and this is, by the way, this is not something I knew in 2017. This is something like I've learned because we needed to learn on both sides. There would be conversations that kind of didn't feel like amazing, but they were difficult ones for the business. But now we got to a point where we educated ourselves because I believe everyone can be a better communicator. It's not you're just good at it or you're not. You can become better at it. And we learned to communicate. So we would basically say versus like, like you said this, it was so mean. It's like, hey, when you said this is the story I told myself, or this is how I felt. So it's not like you're pointing the finger at someone whenever you're having challenges. It's just being like, okay, well, I am responsible for my feelings. I'm just letting you know my feelings versus you're responsible for my feelings. I think that's one of the biggest things that I've learned in communication on a business setting. It's just in a friendship setting as well. It's really taking responsibility for how I show up and what I feel, because they're all the stories we tell ourselves.
I love that. I think it's so important. I think it's so mature as well to take responsibility for your feelings, because sometimes people don't know when they hurt you.
Yeah.
And they never know unless you tell them. So I used to be one that bottled up my feelings inside, and you don't know if what a person meant, what their intentions were, but when you share it, you can know, you can find out, and you can work from there. I also love that you say you had therapy, because I feel like a lot of times therapy, even though a lot of people are talking about it now, people are scared to get it. And especially in a business relationship, because most people think personal therapy, maybe even, romantic relationship therapy. But I think you might be the first person that I've talked to that said, I went to therapy with my business partner. And it's so smart, because you also can have places where you're just on a different page and you have to learn how to communicate.
Yeah. And again, it's really, really funny because we did this podcast recently because I'm going through a divorce right now. And so we've done a lot around, okay, well, what does, prenups look like? What does the negotiations look like? All those things. And one thing that came up that the lawyer said that we had on is like, if you leave it too long, therapy is too late. If you're out the door when you start therapy, it's never going to resolve anything. And I think that's my lesson, or like a message that I would want to tell everyone, like, don't wait till it's too late in any relationship, because like it can be like, you can wait so far, like you don't say things, you don't communicate, and then it's too late. You're already out the door. Yeah. And so that's always the thing with Natalie and I. It was never that we were having big arguments or that we were having problems. We weren't. We've actually been really lucky in that, 9.5 times out of 10, we get on perfectly well. In fact, I'd probably say it's like 10 out of 10 now, because we've learned to communicate better. But in those early days, but it was more just around being proactive. Okay, well, your upbringing was like this. My upbringing was like this. So we have different experiences of communication. How can we work together to make sure that they work well together versus repel each other? And so that was what it was. It was just proactive. So it wasn't like we went for big problems. It was just like, hey, like, how can I show up for you better? And I think that's the other thing, when you go in with intentions to be better for yourself and the other person, like, that's when things really blossom and relationships really blossom and grow, versus going in with being like, well, I have all this stuff that's been going on for ages. I'm just angry and I need a place to vent.
Yeah.
It's not always the best way to go into therapy. But yeah, I've done therapy.
I love that. That's so true too, as well. And I love that you're all about personal and professional development. And I know you mentioned that you went through a divorce, and I personally know that it wasn't easy for you. So can you share a little bit about how hard that was for you, especially wanting to be one like focused on growth and working things out? But can you share a little bit about how you got through that very tough decision to transition that relationship?
Yeah, it's been really hard actually. And it's one of those things where I'm like, oh, do I talk about this or not? But honestly, my journey as like a 30-something-year-old getting divorced, I found it really lonely because there weren't other people talking about it. And so I've kind of made this a point now to talk about it so that the stigma isn't there and people don't feel so lonely, and that they can perhaps learn from some of the things that I didn't know. And like I said, just in this podcast, just sharing, like, talk before it's too late. I left things way too late. I did not bring things to the surface of my relationship, which should have been brought up way before. And it has been a really difficult journey. But one of the things that I try and do is, I think there's two lessons from it. One is that it is okay giving yourself permission and giving those around you permission to change things. Because I think that's what I did in my career. I gave myself permission to change my career, and it was the best decision I ever made. And I also gave myself permission to leave a marriage that was not supporting me in being reaching my potential. And likewise him, because I think when you have at least one person upset in a marriage, you will have another. Yeah. And I think that's what's really powerful, is that actually, we sometimes feel like if we make a decision, we can't change our minds later down, or we go down one path, we can't change a different direction. And the way I look at my life is, let's say I'm starting in LA and I want to make my way over to New York. There are so many different routes that I can take. It doesn't mean that they're the wrong route. If I have that North Star of what I want my life to be like, and when I say what I want my life to be like, I really tune into how I want to feel every single day, or the impact that I want to have. That's what's important to me. And when I have that at the forefront in my mind, it becomes much easier to make those decisions on, hang on a minute, I need to turn left here, or do you know what, I'm on the right track, or do you know what, I need to do a detour around this part. And I think that's the way I started to look at my life, was just going, you know what, it's okay to change. I'm still on the same road, I'm just taking a different route. And ultimately those decisions are my decisions, and I know they're in my best interest, because I really feel like when something's not, like, when you're not in line, you're not purposeful, and you're not authentic. Like, that eats away at you. And the only way I could describe it is, if anyone ever feels like they can't shine, whether that's in the role that they're doing at work, in relationships, friendships, romantic, whatever it is, like, just really ask yourself, like, am I in, what is serving me? Like, is this really serving me? If I don't feel like I can be my full expression, I can't fully shine. That's the question I asked myself, and the answer was no, so I changed it.
I love that. Permission to change and permission to shine.
Yes.
I love that. So at Get Loved Up, we focus on spirituality, wellness, and entrepreneurship. And I know we really started geeking out over energy and like really how energy works. And I know you grew up with a specific religion, but you really got clear on how energy worked when you went to Jody Spencer's workshop. And I love Jody Spencer. So can you share with people about your experience there and what you feel about like energy and spirituality?
Yeah, so as a chiropractor, when I was like learning, there was all this like energy term kind of thrown around a little bit, but not necessarily like something I really understood. I would definitely be aware that my hands would be red hot after treating some people. And, I was definitely aware in certain presences, kind of like I would feel certain ways. But basically, I discovered Jody Spencer via Natalie, actually. She was living in LA at the time. I was still in the UK, so he wasn't really doing much over there. And she's like, oh, I've been reading this book called Jody Spencer. And I was like, okay, that sounds cool. So I listened to a podcast episode, and I was like, he spoke around meditation and these pieces of this episode. And I was like, wow, I really want to learn to meditate. And I just put his name in Google, and so it happened. Again, remember what I said earlier about the universe deliverance? He was doing this progressive workshop, which is like a 2.5-day workshop, which he barely does. He's more known for his advanced, which are longer ones. And he was doing it in Edinburgh, which, you know, for context was like an hour flight from where I lived. I was like, what are the chances of that? So I was like, okay, I'm going to go. So I really went with like not really knowing what I was like getting into. I'm like, okay, I want to follow this guy. He seems pretty cool. He was actually a chiropractor before previously. So I was like, well, now I really need to go. And he's going to teach me how to meditate. Well, I showed up to that seminar and I was blown away. So I was like a bit of a science girl, you know, chiropractic. I was looking into the science of stuff. Like I loved science as a kid and facts and stuff like that. And one thing that I'd always noticed a little bit was there was like this disconnect that I'd seen previously between like science, facts, and spirituality. It was almost like, yeah, spirituality is like woo-woo. People would say that, like woo-woo, and it's like all of this, and then there's like cold, hard facts and science, Big Bang Theory, all this stuff. But when I went to Jody Spencer's, I learned that that couldn't be further from the truth. And he actually spoke around the science of spirituality, the science of manifestation, the quantum physics. And so my science brain was absolutely loving it. And then this intuition and knowing which I'd had within me that, you know, there were things like there was something out there, or there was this feeling of energies, or there's things I was picking up that I couldn't see. They started to come together. So it was like such a magical weekend where I was like starting to kind of form ideas and understandings that I hadn't been able to before. And, you know, he spoke around, you know, like I said earlier, you know, I would say these things. Well, actually, this is a really funny story, which I've never, ever told publicly before. When I was a kid, I used to be able to do this thing, like, you know, fairs that you would go to. There would be like little games that would be like picking numbers, like pick a square and you can win a prize. Pick a raffle ticket and you win a prize. I always won the prize. And you know what I used to do? I used to close my eyes and feel and let something jump out at me. And I never really understood that until, like I said, I went to Joe's, and then they were talking around like energies and vibrations and put it into context. And then I started seeing, well, actually, yeah, like that starts to make sense because I'm on certain frequencies. And again, when I said, oh, I want to change online business, and then Nick started popping up, like you start vibrating on certain frequencies and you attract then those frequencies. And so once I had an understanding of that, I could start to put it in more practice. And that's probably been one of the most instrumental things that I have learned and applied to business. Because I really believe you are what you say you are. Words have so much power. Your actions have so much power. And if you don't lead with a high vibration and a high energy, you're not going to get it back. And so that's how I really go. That's how then I've learned to apply it in my business. I always try and think, one of the highest energies is like love, right? So I always try and lead with love. If I go into things negatively or with hatred or with, you know, malintention, that's what I'm going to receive back. Whereas if I go in with like, okay, like how can I find that win-win? How can I lead with that love? And you see this, can you start seeing the things that have started to like pull together? I said earlier with me and Natalie, there was never any scarcity. We came in with love and abundance to help each other, and look what we got back in return.
It's amazing. That is a phenomenal story. And I love that you love science and you connected the science and the spirituality. I think Joe Dispenza does it amazingly. And his book, Becoming Supernatural, is one of my favorite to share with my community to read, to understand the science behind spirituality.
Yeah, and I've probably absolutely done his whole book a disservice. So go and read it or go to his seminars, because it's not actually something I ever talk about. Like, I've never spoken about this, but it's just something that I'm like, you know, for this conversation, it is relevant. I know a lot of your listeners are going to relate to it. And know that already. And I'm like, yeah, and what's Danielle saying? We've known this for ages, but I think it's just important to recognize it and recognize the power that we all have, and we're all in control of our energy. And again, when we take responsibility for our own energy, it then ultimately means that those around us start with taking responsibility for their energy as well. And if they don't, then we remove ourselves from that. But,
right. And I think that's so important, because it doesn't matter what religion you come from, energy is energy. And what's interesting about religion is because in religion, you're repeating certain things, you're reading certain things, you have different mantras or scriptures or prayers, and all of that is energy. So that's why people say, well, if you believe in something, and that's what's important.
Yes, because you're believing in a power, you're believing in a high energy. And really, I would say generally, I was brought up Christian, I went to like a Church of England school and we did prayer and that, but it wasn't like I was going to church really regularly at all past the age of 10. But what I would say is that religion is often based on a loving figure or thing or energy at the top. And I think that's what we all gravitate to. And when we can see the synergies between that and then what we hold within ourselves and our highest power, which I believe is our hearts and how we lead with the love and the energy that we're putting out there, I think then it doesn't really matter always the story behind it. It's like the intuition and the knowing of what you know to be true. I think that's my biggest thing. It's like not necessarily what I'm told, it's just like this feeling of what I know to be true.
Yes. And I feel like we can all feel it if we stop and listen. And that's why meditation is so important.
Yeah, and just stop and like talking about that, like stopping and listening, just allowing ourselves. I think as women, particularly, we have such a powerful intuition. And over a period of time, I think that's been lost. Like we don't actually stop and listen to our intuitions. And I had Jamie Kanlima, who you know as well, on our podcast, and she said that to me. She was like, you have to make space to stop and listen to your intuition, listen to that gut instinct. And that's really, really powerful. And I think, again, something that we just forget about.
Yeah, I think we forget it, and sometimes I feel like we're forced to do other things when we're forced to just like conform or do what we're told or, be seen and not heard. I think that a lot of times you might feel the intuition, but you're scared to say something, or you're scared you'll be judged if you say something the wrong way or you do something different than the norm.
Yeah, and a lot of people don't trust their intuition as well. And they've lost trust with themselves. And so I think a really good practice is like, okay, well, start small. Like ask yourself, okay, you can play games with it too. Because I think there's intuition and then there's like feelings. So I will sometimes just be like, okay, what's my gut instinct telling me on this smaller thing? I follow it and then it's affirmed, like, oh yeah, I was right to make this decision. And then once you start tapping into it and executing on what you're feeling, then there's like that confidence starts to build. And then other things I'll sometimes play with. If anyone ever wants to play with like manifestation, which again is like a form of attracting energies to you, I built my confidence around that with the car park one, the angel. Have you heard that? The parking fairies?
No.
Okay, you guys have to try this, right? Okay. Like parking in cities and stuff can be an absolute nightmare. Next time you're going somewhere where parking is a nightmare, just like put out into the universe that you visualize yourself driving to your destination and there being a parking spot just exactly where you need it, just outside that door. It's a perfect parking spot. It's easy to get into. It's got plenty of space for your car. And I am telling you, that parking spot will be there.
You're absolutely right, because I said no, but I literally do it all the time, and I just did it today. I do not like coming downtown. We're filming this downtown, and I literally am parked right next to the door, and I was like, I'm going to go downtown. There's not going to be a lot of traffic, and I'm going to slide right in and park and go in. And it's exactly what happened.
And for those who are just listening to this going, you guys are absolutely crazy. try it.
Just try it.
Try it, and you have to visualize it. You have to own it, and you have to see it. And then go and read Jody Spencer's book, and it will start making sense.
Yeah, becoming And I will say this, it won't happen every time.
No.
And I'll say that because, you know, sometimes we feel like if we don't get something we want or get something we vision, we feel like, oh, well, maybe I'm doing something wrong or that's not meant for me. But the thing is, we are all co-creating at the same time. So you have to believe in divine alignment.
Yeah, and that same part of the divine alignment, like I always feel like, you know, part of manifesting or visualization or creating, like things don't go perfectly, but they're always here to serve you.
Mm-hmm.
Like if I think of all the things that you could argue have gone wrong in my life, well, I've actually come back so much stronger from them. And I think the key thing is, you know, if you don't quit, you can't fail. And sometimes it's like, do you know what? I did that manifestation once. That thing didn't come true. I'm not going to try again.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then, you're not going to get it. But just keep trying. Like, and that's the thing. Like, if a child falls over, you don't say, "Oh, don't," you know, trying to learn to walk. A toddler's trying to learn to walk. They fall down like 17 times a day or something with it, or 17 times like every 30 minutes. I don't know. Some mums out there correcting me on this. But it's just like, you know, you don't tell someone to quit, and it's the same thing. Keep trying, and the more you speak it, the more you put it out there, and the more you visualize it, the more you keep trying, you get closer and closer every time. Because let me tell you, if you don't try, you're definitely not going to get it.
Exactly. I love that. And I also love that you're very passionate about values. You know, when it comes to values, when it comes to your health, what are your top things? Because I know like wellness, especially for women right now, is really important, and self-care is really important. Mental health is really important. So what are your values when it comes to your personal health?
So obviously being a chiropractor, it's like what's called a biopsychosocial model. Okay, so it's like not necessarily the traditional Western model. It's all like the biological, the psychological, and the social being like your environment.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've always said, like, I really like a holistic approach. And what I mean by that is I think, unfortunately, right now we've got into this polarization of Western medicine's bad, or like traditional Eastern medicine, however you want to describe it. Like anything outside of Western medicine is good or bad. Mm-hmm. And it's like, no, like we get to work together. We get to apply Western medicine with those traditionals. Like I've had acupuncture, I love acupuncture, or with some of those herbs and stuff that have been used for generations and thousands of years. And I'm really passionate about having a conversation. Like I feel like nowadays we're becoming so polarized that it's not okay to be in the gray area. Like why can't we say, like, actually, do you know what? I love these things over here and I love these things over here, and I'm bringing them all together. And I really want to empower people listening to take ownership of their health and own that, because, you know, let's just say this with the society we're in, that you're kind of getting pushed in one way, but you get a choice. And I think every single person has to take responsibility for their health. In the UK, you have the NHS, which on reflection, we're very, very lucky to have. It kind of gets a bit of a bad rep, but since being in the US and hearing about certain insurances and payouts, I'm actually really grateful for that. But there was very much this feeling of like, you know, your health is a responsibility of your doctor. You know, I'm just going to my doctor and I expect him to tell me X, Y, and Z, or put me on X, Y, and Z drugs. But I disagree. I think we all have, if you want to be in peak performance and peak health, you have a responsibility to read and look things up and ask questions and make informed decisions. And I think that's really important. And, you know, because I didn't make informed decisions when I was younger. And I had, you know, I went on certain medication without asking why I was going on it. And that didn't serve me in the long run. You know, I found out when I was probably around, I mean, it was actually kind of up and down, because probably around 28, but then really again when I was 32, about my polycystic ovaries. But I never asked the right questions properly. You know, I had symptoms of it, like lots of women. I had acne, but guess what? Oh, let's go on the pill for your acne. Well, that just masked actually what was going on, but I wasn't taking responsibility. I didn't know how to take responsibility at that age for my health. Whereas now, as like a 33-year-old, I'm like, okay, well, I have this. What can I do about it? Okay, what does Western medicine have to offer? Awesome. Okay, what are other things that I could do about it? Not once has any doctor mentioned to me about looking at my diet or looking at my gut health or any of those things. But fortunately, through like conversations that I've had, we had an amazing lady on the other day on the podcast. Basically, you're probably like me, is why you love podcasting. Like you get to like pick the brains of incredible people.
Right.
And she was telling me like how important gut health is, particularly with skin as well. So I'm like, right, I'll get this probiotics, I'll get those prebiotics, I'll do these things, and I'm also going to try and give up gluten and dairy. But I'm only doing that because I took responsibility. Went to my doctors and I'm like, yeah, do you want to go back on the pill again? I'm like, not really. Like, come on. So that's what I'm passionate about. And it's so funny. You kind of lead your life and you don't really see, like you don't do reflections. But when I come on a podcast like this and you're asking me these questions, I'm seeing this common theme. And a big value of mine, whether it's in health, whether it's in like business or anything, it's taking responsibility. We all have to take responsibility for our actions and show up in the best way that we can, and take, it's responsibility to learn, a responsibility to grow, a responsibility to do freaking better. Like that's what I believe in.
I love that. Taking personal responsibility. And on the podcast, I feel like we find all these answers because we're asking questions. And when you ask questions, that's when you get answers. And sometimes, like you said, when we just leave it up to our doctors or leave it up to anyone outside of ourselves to really know that only what we know from our body, it really takes the power from ourselves and gives it to someone else. So I think that's very empowering for you to say, like, take it on yourself to listen.
Yep.
To really know what's going on in your body. And I'm so glad that, you've had these conversations and you're like, okay, I'm taking my health into my own hands. I'm not just going to get on the pill again and just, mask the situation, but you're actually going deeper and saying, how is my body speaking to me?
Yeah. And you can still seek out professionals. I'm not saying that I'll just Google it and then, bring it from there. Like you can just go and seek out different professionals, ask different questions. And I think for anyone who wants to achieve anything in their life or get anywhere, just like I spoke about that LA to New York, like you have that North Star, my health, like in New York, in that kind of vision, like my health is good. I have clear skin. I have all these things. So it's like, finding out what that route is and asking those people along the way, but don't lose sight of it and take responsibility. No one owes you that trip to New York. Right. No one owes you anything. So it's like, okay, how can I take responsibility for creating that vision for myself?
I love it. I love that. All right, last question. You have this amazingly successful business, and I know that your business is focused on values as well. So can you talk a little bit about your values in your business and how you feel like you have grown as much as you've grown now and where you're going with your company?
So BossBabe is the brand behind women's success. That's what I would say. We believe that women get to be unapologetically ambitious, and we want to help them achieve their version of success, because do you know what? Not everyone's version is the same. It doesn't look the same. And I think we all get to define, like we want BossBabes to define what their version of success is. And that can be like partly, work related, personally, health related, all of those things. And they get to put that definition on it themselves. And I think that's really, really important. And the next thing is like, I am here to help women create more wealth. 100%. That is a big value of mine. I genuinely believe that if we have more female entrepreneurs, if we have more financial power in a way with women, I think it'll create better balance. And that's why I'm so passionate about speaking on it. But I think to get there, you have to be, it takes a very well-rounded individual, which, like you say, is looking at all these different aspects to get there. But yeah, that's what BossBabe is about. Like we're growing. We primarily grow on social media and our podcast and just having these conversations like we're having today. And it's not easy, but just getting away from the highlight reel and just sharing real stories about real women who are building businesses or building careers or whatever that looks like, and the struggles that they have in their health and their children and divorces and all that.
All the things.
Yeah.
Well, I love that. I love that. And you also are going to start live podcasting coming up soon.
Yeah, we've been doing, we've had a podcast for about 2 years, but we never did video. So we relaunch super soon, like about the 4th and 7th of October. So we'll see what this date gets released. But yeah, really exciting. And again, just asking questions on how we can show up and make the world a better place.
Well, I absolutely love that. And I have a little lightning round for you. Okay. All right. What's the favorite book you read in the last year?
Ooh, favorite book. I love The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks.
Okay.
My favorite. Anyone who's looking for inspiration, push through the next level, you want a little bit more, read that. It's a great one.
Putting it on my list. What's your favorite meal? I know we both love to eat.
I love to eat. Can I just say like all Thai food?
Yes. Yes. I'm with you right there. Awesome. What makes you laugh the most?
Being around people who have a loving energy. Like there's nothing like it. I mean, if I'm in a room with people who are just radiating love and abundance and just good energy, that makes me laugh. And I have to ask you that question because we're always laughing. Yeah, like we're never together and not laughing. Yeah, it's so much fun. Life's too short not to laugh.
And last question, if this could be Danielle's world, what would it look like?
I think it's got to be around collaboration over competition. I feel like we live in a world where we believe the only way to rise is to stand on other people, and I fundamentally disagree with that. And I think the more people who wake up to feel like, do you know what, you get further in this world by supporting other people around you. Yeah, like it would be a much nicer place to live.
I'm down for that world. I love it. Thank you so much, Danielle. It's been such a treat to have you on the Get Loved Up podcast. Can you let everyone know where they can find you and check out some more of your good stuff?
Yeah, you can find me on social media at Danielle Canty. You can find BossBabe at bossbabe.inc. And you can also find us on the podcast, the BossBabe podcast.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you all so much for tuning in and getting loved up with us. Remember, until next time, love yourself, love others, and love the world one day at a time, one breath at a time. And if you're not subscribed to our YouTube channel, make sure you subscribe and leave comments. Let us know your feedback. Let us know your biggest takeaways from this section with Danielle. Tag Danielle and I on social media so we can see you, so we can share you, so we can celebrate you. Until next time, get loved up. I just want to take a moment to say thank you for being part of the Get Loved Up community. I like to share topics and people making a positive impact in the world, and your feedback means the world to me. If you haven't already left a review, please leave a 5-star review and let me know what you want to hear more of on the show. I'm here for you, and together we're making the world a better place, one day at a time, one show at a time. Thank you for listening.